Okay guys, this ain't prepping. Stand by, I'll tell you why. Cue the intro. Alright, so how could cutting firewood not be prepping, right? And then, I mean, let's face it, if the grid goes down, what else would you burn, right? You gotta heat, you gotta cook, you gotta have fuel. There's no propane running, there's no electricity going through the lines, heating oil's not flowing. You don't have any choice but firewood. And obviously, I mean, you're right, you gotta have firewood. The problem is not firewood, the problem is how we cut firewood is very, very grid dependent. And don't get me wrong, I cut a lot of firewood. That's all we heat with here. We cook with it a little bit. We're trying to cook with it some more. We don't even have heat other than our wood stove. We pulled the furnace out when first thing we moved in. But here's the problem. And I don't have a solution now. I'm not, this isn't a how-to video. I don't do how-to videos. So if you've got a solution, feel free to tell me what it is. Chainsaws. This is my little one. I got a felon saw right here. They need gas, obviously. They need two different types of oil. They need chains, and they need files. And all these things are highly perishable, and they wear out quickly, especially the files and the chains. Now, you could convince me that you could produce some sort of alcohol-based fuel and some sort of plant-based oil and come up with a way to actually run the motor. And I'm sure you could probably convince me that it wouldn't gum up the carburetor, and you could modify it so it all worked. But you still got the problem of the chain. These suckers wear out, especially if you get them in the dirt, you hit a rock, if there's a nail in a tree. Sometimes you'll find barbed wire that's growing into the tree. You got no way of knowing it's there until you just hit it with your chain. And then you got to sharpen the stinking thing. You got to have a file, and it takes the life down on the chain. Historically, what they do, you know, I think historically they didn't buck wood the way we buck it. You know, we'll cut these big old stinking trees that in the past I don't think anyone would have cut for wood. Sometimes if you'll see pictures of old homesteads, you'll see these big piles of what we would call twigs. You know, they were just burning little stuff that they could, you know, they could maybe chop with an axe with one or two hits. But they didn't really have a way to square off the butt, you know, the ends. They didn't have square ends, so they could turn it up. See if I got a piece here. Yeah. So they could turn it up and split it with the splitting maul. In fact, the splitting maul is not even a traditional tool. This tool was unheard of on homesteads and farms at the turn of the century. This is a modern invention here. It's actually, you know, that's why it's got a trade name, Go Devil. They call them down south. If you talk about splitting maul, most people don't know what you're talking about. You'll have to say Go Devil. And that's because you didn't get squared off pieces of firewood to split. Now, so here's the first obvious solution, right? The bow saw. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to cut a big piece of wood with well, at least this kind of bow saw. I haven't figured out how to make it work yet. It goes great until you get it down in the blade completely down into the wood, and then it gets very, very difficult. I don't know if they oiled these or rosined them or did something to make them slide easier. I know I've seen old, I can't remember, they called them bucking, well, they used to buck wood, then they used bow saws to do it. I'm sure you've seen the ones with the wooden frames with the wire going between to tighten the handle. They used it. I haven't figured out how to make it work. If you have any experience with that, please let me know. The point being that, you know, if the grid really went down, most of us are all thinking in the back of our mind, oh, heat, fuel, that's a checked box. I can do that. I can cut firewood like nobody's business, because most of us can. The problem is the tools we use to cut firewood are not going to be available to us. or at least to most of us, or at least readily available. So what's the solution in the meantime? How do we solve this? You know, you're not going to really store that much firewood. It takes up a lot of space and it rots. I don't care. I guess if you got it in and dry, got it covered, it'd last a while. But even so, termites can get into it and whatnot. And after a while, it dries out to the point where it's not really useful for firewood. So I don't have a real good solution. I obviously figured out how to use a bow saw. Maybe my bow saw is the problem. I don't know. To buck, get it in your head that you're not going to be cutting big pieces, that you're not going to have nice, big, thick, dense pieces of firewood to produce a lot of heat easily. That maybe we have to be collecting twigs and branches and stuff we can chop with the axe in 1 or 2 blows. Maybe you buck with the axe and there's a way to split it laying on the ground flat. I've never had any luck with that, and to me it seems pretty dangerous as far as there's a good chance that log would roll one way or the other, and your axe or your maul would careen off to the side and possibly hit you or something else. Or that just doesn't seem like a real good solution. But maybe it works. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. I just know that what we do here is grid dependent, because the chainsaws are grid dependent. And that kind of goes against our goals here. We're trying to get off the grid. We're trying to be as self-sufficient as possible. Certainly, cutting firewood with a chainsaw is way more self-sufficient than using central heating and air, or propane, or heating oil, or any of that. So, I'm not criticizing anyone who's using firewood. We use firewood. The problem is it's not self-sufficient. It's not grid independent. Which I think for most of us is kind of the long-term goal, or at least the ultimate dream, So, I don't know. Tell me what you think. I'd like to hear some explanations or some solutions. Thanks, guys.